I'll be patient. No problem. Well, anyway, I'll start talking. But it's great to see everybody. I see some new faces here, obviously. I don't know you, and you don't know me. But, of course, the old faces know me, and I know them. But I was actually here at Beth Messiah. We have a long history, about 27 years. So I'm no stranger to Beth Messiah. I haven't been here physically present as much as I used to be, but my heart is still here, and I miss all you. Good seeing you, and great to see faces and catch up. And it's just a blessing to be here today. So anyway, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I grew up in Bexley, as most of you know, is a pretty Jewish community. Yes, indeed. And I came to faith at Beth Messiah in 1994. That's where I came to know the Lord. Back when we met over near the Easton Worship Center, whatever that street was on, I don't remember. But that was the old days, and Howard was preaching on the book of Matthew, and I had never read the Bible, but I was kind of raised as a nominal Methodist kid in Bexley, and I was raised around a lot of Jewish people, and I had no idea that Jewish people even believed in Yeshua. I had never heard anything like that. And so I was listening to Howard's messages, and God got hold of me and convicted me, and that was it. I became a believer right on the spot. I think I was probably just sitting in the back row at the place at the time, and that's when I came to faith. And so anyway, God immediately, He really gave me a heart for Jewish people very quickly. I grew up around a lot of Jewish people, and I just wanted to, it was just obviously, Beth Messiah was where I needed to be. And so I grew in my faith for years here. I learned so much, and I just, beyond anything I could ever imagine, and just learned how to serve God in so many capacities. And so I wouldn't even be where I'm at today without Beth Messiah. I mean, Beth Messiah has been a blessing to me and my family, and we stick with each other through thick and thin, and of course we know a lot of the ins and outs of life, so that's what you all are here doing today, sticking with each other. But anyway, so when Howard contacted me to speak, he said, Howard and I meet, maybe once every couple months. We have breakfast still, and Howard, he likes to eat breakfast, so we like breakfast. But it's fine with me. Sunnyside, it's a living place where my dad is. It's great. I can knock two birds out with one stone. But he texted me and said, I'm at a retreat, and he said, would you come and speak on, just give an update of what's been going on all the ministry at Ohio State and everything. So before I talk about that, I just want to mention that I got to go to Israel this year. And I was going to go with Beth Messiah a few years ago, but COVID kind of spoiled that. But the opportunity came up this year to go with the mission I'm involved with called CGF Ministries. They're a Messianic ministry out of Texas, and I'm the Midwest representative here. But so I got to go, as you can see. And I don't know if you can see those pictures clearly, maybe look a little faded, but if you look up on the corner where I'm sitting like I'm having a cup of coffee, and there's a guy with a hat looking at me. Some of you may know who he is. His name's Rob Styler. Rob has spoken here before. I know some of you don't know Rob, I understand. But some of you do, and Rob is my boss, technically. And Rob and Howard go way, way back. They went to Bible college. I think together they served in the same mission. So Rob is one of the funniest human beings you'll ever meet in your entire life. And so for those of you, if maybe Rob will come back and speak sometime, you'll see how funny he is. But I got to be with Rob 12 straight days in Israel, and it was kind of funny because we were on the Sea of Galilee on the boat. You go out in a boat and you sit out there, and we had the boat stop, and no motor or anything. It was real quiet, and we were just sort of sitting there, and it was perfectly calm. And of course, the passage came to my mind about Yeshua calming the storm and the water, and it was just absolutely peaceful. It's going to be the most peaceful thing ever. And I look over at Rob and I say, this feels kind of supernatural. And so being Rob with his sense of humor and the fact that he's from New Jersey, he's got a New Jersey accent, he also kind of looks like he could have been the movie Goodfellas or like The Godfather. But he's every single place we went to after that day, every time we're at a new location, Rob would look at me and say, Eric, does that feel supernatural? It's like, Eric, is that supernatural? What do you think? Does it feel supernatural? So that was his ongoing joke with me, nonstop. And then when I'm floating on the Dead Sea, which is one of the biggest highlights there is, just to lay there for an hour and stare up at the sky, and you can't get pushed over and you can't move, which is fantastic. I came back to the hotel, and sure enough, Rob's like, oh, I bet that was supernatural, wasn't it? So it was ongoing, nonstop jokes about supernatural. But going to Israel, I know you have an opportunity to go, and if you can go, I really encourage you to go if you can. It was certainly life transformational for me, and I'm an archaeology and history buff anyway, so just being there and seeing all that was incredible. And God is still working there, just to be around all these Jewish people, in the Jerusalem marketplace. I've got the Orthodox here and the non-Orthodox. It was just a really amazing thing. So if you can go. I encourage you to go, I understand. But anyway, maybe take it seriously and try to go if you can. Okay. Well, anyway, I don't want to talk too much about what I'm doing. I want to talk more about what God's doing. Okay, because he is doing some incredible things in this city and on the college campuses. So what happened was, back in 2005, when I was at Beth Messiah, we had always had a presence at Ohio State. Beth Messiah always had a history at Ohio State, like a Bible study, an outreach. Some people came to faith there. I know some people here may even go back to that time, but I went to Howard and the elders and Chris and at the time Elliot, and I said, I'd really like to pick that back up and go down to Ohio State and do something, like reach out to students in some capacity. And it started out very small. I basically just wanted to go I started going down there like twice a week as an internship. I was working and just would talk to students, about spiritual questions. We had outreach, a little table there every once in a while. I tried to talk to Jewish students, whoever, and it went pretty well. But then what happened with Howard, he was speaking. Howard used to work part-time for a mission called CGF Ministries. He would go speak on Sundays while he was doing Beth Messiah. But that kind of came to an end, and Howard came to me and said, I just want to focus on Beth Messiah and not do that speaking anymore, and traveling a lot, by the way. And so he said, why don't you just take my spot, and you can go full-time, and then you can focus on the campus. So I did that, and so I've been there since 2005, and so technically I've been on the campus since 2005. That's a long time, as you know. So what we try to do on both universities, because we're now at Columbus State, which is a whole other ministry, by the way, very large community college now, we have to cover a lot of ground. And what we try to do on both campuses is focus on outreach, equipping, and educating. That's what we really try to do. And when I started out, as I said, in 2005, we were just doing a couple days a week talking to students, but it is gone beyond anything I could ever imagine, and God has just really done incredible things. Now, being at Ohio State, in Columbus State, we automatically assume these are two secular schools, right? You're not going to like a religious school or anything. It's not like Cedarville or something. So, these are schools that are generally filled with all kinds of people from all different backgrounds, of course. There's about 3,000 to 5,000 Jewish students at Ohio State, more than Columbus State, of course. But, it's very diverse. But, one thing that we do need to understand is that, there is a lot of, secular thought on the campus, of course, because it's a secular school. That doesn't mean there's no religious people there. It doesn't mean there's no people who believe in God, as we'll talk about. But, we kind of have a worldview that's been on the campus, and it certainly is more obvious in some areas. Like, if you look at seculars, and this is my friend Natasha Crane gave me a definition, which I kind of agree. And I see some of this, where, secularism is a worldview based on some very specific assumptions. Feeling's the ultimate guide, happiness is the ultimate goal, judging is the ultimate sin, and God is the ultimate guess. Okay? And so, yes, some of these things come up on a college campus, but what we started to do back around 5 or 6 years ago was we decided to switch gears and just really focus, we always had done this, but really focus on a higher level, is just follow the Messiah's example. And, if you read through the Gospels, you probably notice that Yeshua asked a lot of questions. He didn't really always, just shout at people, whatever. He just really asked a lot of questions, and that's a great method. And we've tried to follow his example by being on campus and just asking big questions and getting students to think about what they believe, get into these conversations, talk about these issues, okay? It's not confrontational, it's very conversational, very non-threatening. And yesterday I had a student came up to us, he said, I really like your approach. He's like, I'm an atheist, but I really like this is great. I'm like, oh good, well believe in God then. But anyway, so But anyway, doesn't matter if you like my approach. I'm more concerned about your belief in God. We need to get you to God. But anyway, so what we do with these questions are we kind of show up and we table. See, we set up tables on the campus and we just ask big questions like, this is the most popular one, does God exist? Now, you may be looking at it, and the markings on it, and saying, wow, there's a lot of yeses there. I mean, more than I thought. Maybe at Ohio State with 64,000, the Ohio State University, but at the Ohio State University with 64,000 students, I thought that we'd just see all no's, but no. There are still, on a college campus of that size, you do have a lot of believers or believing in God. I mean, there's a lot of people that still believe in God. Yes, there's still those that don't. But, back in about 2010 to 2014, like I said, we've been there for a long time, 2009 to 2013 or 14, that's when, I don't know if you even remember, some of you are maybe younger or older, I mean, some of you remember, a lot of the atheist literature was being written. All these books are being put out, and there was this hot thing about atheism. Where's Shalitha? Is she in here? Shalitha, raise your hand if you're still in here. Are you in here? She's not in here. Well, anyway, Shalitha knows about this because we used to talk about this. But anyway, so there was this big push towards atheism. And so I'd go on campus, and we'd set up, and at the end of the day, I'd be like, oh my gosh, Lord, I'm tired of talking to atheists. Like, everyone seems like they're just atheistic. So, but that kind of faded. It kind of faded out. It was just a phase, and it's not really, that's not where the campus is these days quite as much. I mean, still some of it, but not as bad. So another question we asked, very similar, is God real? Very similar question, just to get people thinking. So it's really fun, when you have 64,000 students coming by your table in droves, just walking by and going, like that. And then some of them going like this. We call them the hit and run people, like, yes, no, and they keep going. And then, of course, we get the people that want to talk. The people come up and will talk more, okay? It just depends on who we're talking to. But why do we focus on the existence of God question? Why start with that? Everyone in this room, I assume, believes in God already, so this is a non-starter for us. The reason is because the God question is the question of all questions, okay? It is the most important question of all time, whether God exists. It impacts every single facet of reality, okay? It impacts the way we view reality. It impacts our values, how we treat people. It impacts our ethical choices. It impacts where we think we came from, where we're going. And how about number 6, that identity question, right? We don't have a struggle with that today, right? Who we are and our purpose. And so that's why we really hone in on that question. We have some other questions too. I think we probably know today that we are at the place where there's a lot of groups out there and a lot of focus on fighting for certain people groups, right? And of course, Jewish values, we do that. That's good. We do that. Christian values, same thing. Fighting and for the people that the less fortunate, and fighting for those that have needs and discrimination, those things. But one thing that you got to think about: if God doesn't exist, a good question to ask, as we say, why does anyone matter? Okay. And so when you have students on a campus that are getting involved with all these social causes, which is fine. We like to always ask them this question, because, if God doesn't exist, then why are you fighting so hard for value, dignity, and rights of anybody, okay? I had a girl came up to our table once, I think it was last fall, and she was mostly atheistic, and she said, well, do you believe, you should do this for these people or that for those people, and blah, blah, blah. I started getting into these moral issues and social issues. And I said, well, you're an atheist? And she said, yes. And I said, well, why does anyone matter? And she said, that's a good question. Yeah, so I wasn't trying to be snarky, but it's true. If God doesn't exist, we don't have value, dignity, and equal rights, okay? That just goes away, okay? So the other thing with the identity question is really important. Did anybody ever watch Antique Roadshow? Does anybody watch that show? Okay. Well, my mom used to love Antique Roadshow, and when I lived with her a few years back when we were taking care of her, I tried to sit down and watch it with her, but she just loved Antique Roadshow. So what happens is these people bring in the furniture, the item to the antique dealer or the place, the specialist, and they walk up to the guy, like this woman right here, and she says, "What is this worth? I've got this chair. It's, cherry wood, whatever," and they film the whole thing. It's really cool to see these antiques. But, what the antique dealer says to the customer is he will say, well, I can't answer what it's worth until I know a couple things. I need to know, what is this thing made of? What's the composition of it? And then where'd you get this? Where'd you find this? Where does it come from? And she might say, well, my grandma had it, it was hers, and I took it over, whatever. But he can't really answer what it's worth until we figure out where it came from and what it's made of, or what is it exactly, okay? And, we can't really answer the identity question until we figure out where we come from and, of course, what we are, okay? If we're not creating the image and likeness of God, and, if we're just globs of matter who don't have souls, that, we're not more than that. If we're spiritual, we're not spiritual beings, that's going to play a big role in how we view ourselves, okay? So the crisis over identity just simply goes back to answering two questions: where we come from and what are we and who are we, okay? So that's a good thing. That's one of the reasons we focus on the God question a lot, okay? Now, Paul, when in his day, he was very fortunate in some ways, despite all the challenges he had, I know, going in and talking in the synagogues and things, but would have loved to have been right by him there. Would have been fun. But, when he was preaching, if you read the book of Acts, and you guys have, students of Scripture, that the Jewish audience he was dealing with, for most already believed in God. He wasn't dealing with, hey, are you atheists, or are you Jewish? Are you sure you believe in God? No. The Jewish crowds that he was dealing with already believed in the one true God, the God of the Torah, the God of, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he didn't have to start with that. He would just start with the Tanakh, talking about fulfillment of prophecy, and of course talking about Yeshua rising from the dead. And that was really great. Of course, he didn't always, get the results he wanted. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. But he had a different starting point with them. But it's a little different today. When you go on campus, because today in the Jewish community, you don't really necessarily, if you talk to, depending on who you talk to, of course, between the Orthodox and the non-Orthodox, you don't necessarily have to believe in God to be Jewish, okay, depending on who you talk to. Now, of course, more the Orthodox or observant Jewish people say, no, Judaism is based in religious, it's religion, not just a culture, ethnicity, just depends on who you talk to. But a lot of the Jewish people that we talk to at a high estate, per se, are not necessarily observant. It's not that they're not there, but the ones that we run into a lot are mostly kind of culturally Jewish, but they don't really have a belief in a personal God. It's not really that important to them. It's not part of their identity. Not all of them, but I'd say a lot for some reason. And I personally feel more called to talk to that kind of demographic than the Orthodox. Nothing wrong with talking to the Orthodox. I just always been kind of called to talk to like the secular Jewish mindset. And these guys are right here, bless their hearts, they graduated, it's okay, they're never gonna know I showed this, but this was Evan and Ethan. Yes, they're twins, can you tell? And they would come up to our table, and they're culturally Jewish, and they were kind of staunch atheistic in their views of God, very sciencey people, but they had this YouTube channel called the Wildlife Brothers, and so they're zoology majors. And so they would love to debate, and they would love to talk about arguments for God and arguments against God and, and science and all that stuff. So we talked to them many, many times, and it was very cordial. But anyway, so that's an example just of a couple students like that. And then it's interesting that there is a well-known writer. I don't know if you ever heard of Jonathan Haidt, but he wrote a book called The Righteous Mind. Gee, think of that title. Why people are divided by politics and religion. Nah, not at all. But anyway, he's a brilliant guy. He's a author he teaches ethical leadership at New York University School of Business, and he's really like a secular Jewish writer. He doesn't really believe in a personal God, kind of atheistic in his views of God, but culturally Jewish. And his nephew goes to high estate, and I happened to have the chance to run into his nephew his freshman year. And his name was Ben. He grew up in New Albany. But our religious discussion started his freshman year, and we ended up having a lot of good God talks, and he would come up to our table over and over and over, and we would talk and talk and talk. And so he'd tell me about his uncle. I said, I have his book. This is great. So anyway, we had something in common. But, it's interesting that the Pew Research Center in 2020 says here, overall, about a quarter of U.S. Jewish adults, 27%, do not identify with the Jewish religion. They consider themselves to be Jewish ethnically, culturally, or by family background, have a Jewish parent, or were raised Jewish, but they answer a question about their current religion by describing themselves as atheistic, agnostic, or nothing in particular rather than as Jewish. Among Jewish adults under 34 intend to describe themselves in this way. Now, some of you have been to Israel, some of you are going to Israel, but you already know when you go there, you see a lot of the Orthodox, of course, observant, and you see a lot of the kind of the secular Jewish community there. It's a mixed bag, right? And so that's where we're at. When you're talking to Jewish people today, people are in a different place, okay? Now, let me go back to this issue of God's existence and all the yeses on there. Why the yeses? See, we don't let them get away with it when they mark it. We ask, why do you say yes? Or why do you say no? Or why do you say I don't know? So why do we find out when they say yes? Like, what is the biggest reason you think God exists? Why would students say yes? Is it upbringing? Is it just I was raised that way, whatever? Do you know what the biggest reason they say? Actually, it is creation. And you would think that on a college campus that they're coming out of these classes like, I don't, there's no God, and I took biology, whatever, and all the science stuff. But Paul's scripture, in Romans 1 about God's existence is clear as day through the gift of the created order. He says God's existence and attributes can be clearly seen through what has been made. It gets through. It gets through to some people, believe it or not. It gets through to more than I thought it would. And it's good because, we know in Romans 1 as we read on, some people don't believe and they fall into idolatry. It's really bad. But for some people, creation just seems to be undeniable with some people, and that's a good thing. There's a book I read a ways back. It's called Undeniable by Doug Axe. He's a molecular biologist of some kind, and he wrote a book called Undeniable, How Biology Confirms Our Intuition that life is designed. And he said that by the age of preschool children, they've showed studies that children at a very early age already see like a design to the world, like there's some sort of creator, like a godlike designer. It's intuitive. They just know. They don't have to be open the Bible even to even know. It's just intuitive. And that's very interesting that it seems like the Romans 1 passage does start getting through at an early age, to some people. So students don't really, when I ask them, they say creation, and they're like, yeah, I just don't, I can't possibly, it just doesn't make sense to believe the following scenario like some people believe. They say, I just don't believe the universe got here through a mindless, undirected, non-conscious process. And they don't believe the humans were produced by an undirected, valueless process. And they don't believe that life just somehow emerged from non-living matter by chance. And they don't believe our universe just happened to get here through chance. So, it's a good thing. I'm not saying all students believe that, but it is a good thing to see the creation does get through and to some people. And they don't have to read the Bible because you don't need to read the Bible to know there's a creator. So, another question we ask, don't look at my expression here. I probably just heard some students say something really goofy. But, the question, this is at Columbus State, are you a good person? Hey, why not that one? Or why use that question? Well, the reason we ask that question is most people care about whether they're good people. We find that. Most students do think about that question. And it leads to a good discussion to find out where their standard of goodness comes from. Does it come from society? Does it come from the individual? Or is God their ultimate standard? Now, what I do is obviously I tell them, they say, well, where does your standard come from, Eric? And I'm like, God. And you know what his standard is? It's 100% perfection, and I can't meet it. And that's why I need forgiveness through the Messiah. So it always leads the door to talk about the good news. Now, what about Columbus State? Let me mention Columbus State. So we started out at Ohio State. Why did we expand to Columbus State? Well, someone gave me an idea, like, Eric, have you gone to Columbus State? There's a lot of students there. I'm like, it's really grown. So we set up there about 4 years ago, and I was like, wow, there's a lot. This is a really good campus. It's great. So we expanded there, and what we found at Columbus State? I don't know if some of you have kids that go there or students that go there, but there's a huge Somali Muslim population there. Huge. I I didn't have a lot of experience talking to Muslims. I mean, my focus has been Jewish people and, skeptical people, but they have some similar objections, about Yeshua's deity and the Trinity and all that stuff. But I've now talked to probably we talked to like more Muslim people I ever thought we would. I mean, there's just a large population there because Columbus has the second largest Somali Muslim population in the country next to Minneapolis. So when we go to Columbus State, we do end up talking to a fair amount of them. But this past Thursday, we talked to a Jewish student, and he had said to us he had looked into Messianic Judaism, and he had visited Beth Messiah. And I said, well, what'd you think? He's like, it was really cool. I'm like, why aren't you there? He's like, well, I'm going through this phase. I'm trying to still figure out what I believe. But he came here about 4 years ago, so that was encouraging. So he's been here. Maybe he'll come back. Pray for him. His name's Jared. Not the Jared, the other Jared that goes here. I know the other Jared. But anyway, okay. Now, how about this question? So this is a newer one we've been using. Does God have your attention? You'd be like, oh, what is that like? How's that go? Why would we want to do that question on a college campus? Why? Why? Oh, well, just maybe there's a little bit distractions these days, just a few, right? I mean, where's my phone here? So, nobody is walking by us on this thing, and nobody is like got headphones on, never, right? No, about probably 75% of students walking by have this thing they're looking at, they got something in their ear. That's why we have whiteboard questions to let them see they can still use their eyes. But, it certainly has been a good question because then students will say to us, well, what do you mean by that? And of course we can ask them, well, is God in your life? Do you think about God? And what's interesting to me is this passage in Ecclesiastes, chapter 7, 1-3, where he says here, the author says, a good reputation is better than precious perfume. Likewise, the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. It's better to go to a funeral than a feast, for death is the destiny of every person, and the living should take this to the heart. Sorrow is better than laughter because sober reflection is good for the heart. I'm trying to figure out, or we're trying to talk to people, is that, you will spend hours and hours and hours scrolling, and looking up articles and looking at things about things that are totally uncertain in life. Hours and hours looking at political issues or other issues, that just leads to anxiety and uncertainty. But you won't deal with the one thing that is certain, and that's the fact we're all going to die. You know that? And God is the only thing that's certain too, that He is unchanging, and if He's real, He's the only thing that's not in flux or changing in any way. So it's really an attempt to get them to slow down for just 3 minutes or 5 minutes to get them to think and talk. And they do. I'm just saying that's why we're using that question now. So, now the other thing God's done, which is really great, is I used to be kind of like a one-man team when I first started. That is long gone now. Now we have students helping with us. We have plenty of volunteers and things. And so we have a whole team, out with us doing this stuff, not on my own. And that's a good thing, because God wants to use a community of people. So there's students that want to get involved with us. They want to learn about it. They want to learn how to talk to people and things like that. So that's really great. I'm really excited about that. We still have events. Some of you have been to our events. We have speakers come in, and we have good turnouts about apologetic topics, things like that. Sometimes we have debates, but just lectures and things. So those are going well. And then, of course, we have meetings. We have weekly equipping meetings, training students on how to talk to people about their beliefs and discipleship and things like that. So it's been really great. And I tell you what, I am so blessed. I have seen some of the most quality students I could ever ask for. I mean, I really have seen some high-quality students, and I'm really blessed by that, okay? And some of them, what's really great, some go on to do other work full-time, after they leave Ohio State. So that's great. Now, one question we do ask, I don't have it on the whiteboard here, but it's really a good question, is an issue of truth. And one of the best questions to ask students is that if it's really true Yeshua is who He is, if it turns out what we believe is true, that He died and rose from the dead, would you follow Him? Would you really commit to that? That's a great question to ask people. If it's really true, would you make a commitment to this? Would you really do it? Because, whether they believe it or not, and whether they walk away from us and we never see them again, it's still going to be true tomorrow. It's going to be true the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next year, and 10 years from now. If it's really true, Yeshua is who he is, it's going to be true, right? It's going to be true tomorrow and the next day. And whether you believe it or not doesn't make it true. You could, not believe, say, I don't believe it. Well, that doesn't mean it's not true. It's either true or it's not true. Yeshua rose from the dead or he didn't. Okay, it's a historical claim. So that's a question we pose. But let me tell you something that I am really excited about. And I told you for years we had talked to a lot of atheistic people. I was kind of skeptical, not seeing a lot of people come into faith. It was kind of very difficult. I call it hard soil, like the parable of the sower. Probably about 2020, when COVID came around, and we still could get on campus a little bit. There's some restrictions and things. That's when things shifted. We started to see right at the beginning, I think it was beginning of 2020. In the last 3 years, we have seen more and more people just coming to faith. Many, many people open to spiritual things, hearing the good news, accepting the Lord, me not having to give 20 reasons or arguments or evidences, just they believe. Paul, it's like the gospel is just getting through to people. It's like the power of salvation. We just share, and people say, yeah, I want that. I want that. I want a relationship with God. I want to believe. And we have seen many, many people come to faith. We just saw many people this week come to faith. So God seems to be, I don't know, the last few years, we go through seasons, but there seems to be a softening. And it's great. I'm ecstatic about it. But so it's a great time to be out. And I really believe also, you're a Beth Messiah. Many of you are out, your own social circles and doing things. Just be sensitive where you are, because Columbus is a great city. It's growing like crazy. God is bringing so many people here, and people are open. People are really open. So just be sensitive to where you're at. But when we go out and we're sharing, we really do just believe that as we pray, we ask God to send us divine appointments every day, and he does that. I believe he sends us the people that we need to talk to, and we just share and leave the results to God. That's all you ever can do. It's a parable of the sower working, that we can control the soil. So, I'm really grateful that, when I went to the elders back in 2005, that the opportunity opened to start doing this, to go to Ohio State and start doing university ministry, that they were willing to give me that opportunity, because it's been an amazing experience. And so I'm just so grateful for the opportunity, how it's grown and grown and grown, and where we're at now. It's just taken off, and it's just exciting to see what God is doing. We are all ambassadors for Messiah, and we're all ministers of reconciliation. And so if you view yourself as a minister of reconciliation, that is something, a privilege to be able to do. That people need to hear the good news, and you are the agent to help them hear about the good news. So I appreciate Beth Messiah still sticking with us and, help supporting us and, asking for prayer. I try to keep Howard up to date with what we're doing. But if anybody here ever wants to come out with us, want to come down to the campus, I have people contact me. They want to come out with us today. You're welcome to come. It happens all the time. You want to just observe or hang out, it's great. But be praying for the campus. I appreciate it. And be praying that God sends us the people he wants us to talk to. But he's doing amazing things. So thanks for having me today. It's great to see everybody.